On February 26, 2019, a man named Lee Hee-jin reported to the Dongwon police station in Anyang City. He was concerned about losing contact with his parents, his 62-year-old father and 58-year-old mother, and sought police assistance in finding them. For those familiar with our previous coverage of South Korean cases, you'll understand the typical approach of the Korean police. They often show minimal concern even for missing children, let alone elderly adults. This case proved no different. The police were notably indifferent to Hee-jin's report. Based on their experience, cases of two elderly people simultaneously going missing were extremely rare. Most elderly missing persons cases were usually misunderstandings or, at worst, medical emergencies while out. However, Hee-jin insisted his parents were in perfect health with no underlying conditions that could cause sudden death. Even if they were ill, the probability of both falling ill simultaneously was practically impossible. After consideration, the police suggested that Hee-jin's parents had likely just gone on a trip or had some business without informing the family. They told him to wait at home for news. This waiting period stretched over 2 weeks. Finally, on March 16th, still unable to contact his parents, Hee-jin was forced to return to the police station for a second time. This time, the police acted with surprising speed. Just 2 days later, on March 18th, they discovered a horrifying scene at the Hyundai apartment complex in Gwangyang, Dongwon District. In a wall cabinet, they found the heavily decomposed body of Soon-ja, Hee-jin's mother. The tragedy didn't end there. That same afternoon, a report came in from rural Pyeongtaek. A local warehouse manager reported an overwhelming stench that villagers had been noticing for days. When they investigated, they found an elderly man's body in a refrigerator. DNA tests later confirmed it was Lee Deok-ju, Hee-jin's father. These two horrifying discoveries on the same day pushed Hee-jin to the brink of collapse. But what shocked him even more was the information in the forensic report. What did this report reveal? Without question, Deok-ju and Soon-ja had been brutally murdered. Their bodies were covered in so many wounds that forensic experts couldn't determine the exact cause of death. This wasn't simply a murder. It was a prolonged torture session that continued until both victims drew their final breaths. The deaths were determined to have occurred on February 25th, just 1 day before Hee-jin first went to the police station. A bitter truth emerged. If the police had taken the initial report seriously, they might have collected more crucial evidence, even though they couldn't have saved the victims. However, the investigators seemed unfazed by this oversight. To them, this appeared to be a typical revenge case. All details pointed in one direction. They believed that by following the victim's social connections, the perpetrator's identity would soon be revealed. The investigation team split into 2 groups, one investigating the area around the crime scenes for potential witnesses, while the other began examining the victims' relationships. Sure enough, near the warehouse where Deok-ju's body was found, several villagers reported possibly seeing the perpetrator. The specific situation was described as follows. On the evening of February 25th, the day of the victims' deaths, there was an unpleasant odor near the warehouse. Some curious villagers followed the smell to investigate. They discovered a strange man burning a bag behind the warehouse. Logically, burning trash in a remote area isn't a major offense. At worst, it might warrant a warning. However, oddly enough, the stranger fled in panic before the villagers could say anything, disappearing almost instantly. Although the villagers found this strange, it was dark, and nothing serious seemed to have occurred, so they dismissed it. Looking back, they realized this mysterious man could very well have been the murderer. The villagers told police the man wasn't tall, was somewhat overweight, and judging by his running speed, wasn't very athletic, likely not a local farmer. This lead about the mysterious man was quickly passed to the team investigating the victim's social connections. But a puzzling detail emerged. No one, from family members to neighbors, could recall anyone matching that description. Instead, they all insisted that the Lee couple lived very privately and always treated everyone well. No one could imagine them being involved in such a bloody revenge killing. However, Hee-jin, the victim's son, had a completely different perspective. As soon as he learned about the burned bag, he suggested that police investigate this as a robbery murder. His reason made the investigators jump. On that fateful morning of February 25th, Hee Jin had just sold his Bugatti Veyron and had given his parents 500 million won, about $400,000, in cash in a bag for safekeeping. Just hours later, they were brutally murdered. And now, a stranger was caught burning a suspicious bag. Could this really be just a coincidence? Upon learning this information, police immediately researched the couple's apartment. The investigation results further supported Hee Jin's theory. There was no trace of the 500 million won or the bag containing it. Checking the victim's bank accounts revealed no unusual transactions involving such a large sum. All signs pointed to this being a premeditated robbery. Notably, information about Hee Jin selling his car was known to very few people, suggesting the perpetrator was likely someone familiar with the family. However, another strange detail caught the investigators' attention. Why did the killer preserve Mr. Deok-ju's body in a refrigerator in a rural Pyeongtaek warehouse, while leaving Mrs. Soonja's body to decompose naturally in the apartment wall cabinet in Anyang? Perhaps this wasn't simply a robbery. This situation could be explained in several ways. Maybe the killer acted alone and couldn't transport both bodies, or the vehicle was too small, or perhaps they intended to move both but encountered an unexpected situation. However, the Korean investigators proposed a bolder theory. They suggested that leaving Soonja's body to decompose naturally wasn't random. It could have been intentional revenge. Compared to Deok-ju, it seemed the killer harbored a deeper hatred for Soonja. All clues pointed to one conclusion. The killer must be someone familiar who had a personal vendetta against Soonja. But just then, an investigator noticed a major contradiction in the entire story. He asked his colleagues, "When you heard about Hee Jin selling his supercar, didn't you notice something? He must be extremely wealthy. So why sell the car at this time?" When asked about the reason for selling the car, Hee Jin casually replied, "I have many nice cars. Selling a Bugatti Veyron was simply getting rid of excess, nothing special." This seemed to be the issue. If Hee Jin was that wealthy, why were his parents living in such an ordinary apartment? In previous cases, whenever wealthy people lived so discreetly, it was usually to hide something. So, was this family concealing some unspeakable secret? With this in mind, the investigator checked the Lee family's background. The findings were startling. The Lee couple didn't just have Hee Jin as their only child. Hee Jin had an older brother named Hee Moon. As soon as this name was mentioned, the scattered pieces of the case began falling into place. To the investigators, the fact that Hee Moon's parents became victims of a massacre seemed almost unsurprising. Wondering why? Let me tell you the story behind Hee Moon's name. From October 2008, South Korea fell into an economic crisis that pushed many citizens into financial hardship. During this time, many people turned to the stock market and investment funds as a lifeline, hoping to find a source of income to improve their lives. Hee Moon emerged as a rising star. He quickly earned glamorous titles in the financial world: the Warren Buffett of Korea, Cheongdam's #1 stock trader, Korea's most experienced investment master. His reputation grew rapidly in Seoul's financial circles. By 2014, Lee Hee Moon's name had spread beyond investment circles. He became a familiar face on major media outlets, from the Korean Economic Channel to various television stations. Lee Hee Moon had built a perfect image of a successful businessman, young, talented, and dazzlingly wealthy. Hee Moon claimed to have graduated from the English Literature department of a prestigious private university in Seoul. During his college years, he said his exceptional tutoring skills earned him about 5 million won, about $4,000, monthly. However, due to his sharp financial mind, after graduation, he didn't pursue an English-related career but went straight into investing. As a result, he achieved a dramatic class jump in less than 10 years. Not only did he buy a mansion in Seoul's wealthy Gangnam district with cash, but he also owned luxury vehicles including Bugatti, Lamborghini, Rolls-Royce, and Bentley. But all of this wasn't what really caught ordinary people's attention. What truly made Hee-moon notable was his apparent dedication to helping common people, freely sharing his investment expertise. He regularly shared his investment secrets on television shows and even helped manage finances for some devoted followers. Just imagine, if a renowned, wealthy, successful person offered to manage your finances, wouldn't you jump at the opportunity? As word spread, many people wanted Hee-moon to help them make money. Faced with this rising investment wave, he reluctantly opened an investment consulting company to handle these matters. For more cautious investors who preferred to trade themselves, Hee-moon generously shared lists of guaranteed profitable stocks. The Lee family quickly turned this opportunity into gold when younger brother Hee-jin established a P2P lending company to help those who wanted to invest but lacked funds. In a brief period, the brothers accumulated a massive fortune of over 20 billion won, about $16 million. But behind the glamour of a stock market mogul lay a dark truth no one expected. All investors who trusted him gradually fell into complete bankruptcy. When some victims became aware and began investigating Hee-moon, they discovered a shocking truth. His entire background was fabricated. Not a single detail of his past was real. For instance, he claimed to have graduated from a prestigious university, but in reality, he had never even attended college. His social media posts flaunting his wealth were all fabricated. He claimed he was about to become the distributor for Lamborghini and Bugatti in South Korea. Upon verification, due to South Korea's small market size, Lamborghini had never considered establishing a new distributor there. Even more outrageous was when in summer 2016, Hee-moon posted on Facebook claiming he had just landed at an airport in China and was preparing to have dinner with a high-ranking official from Jiangsu province. At the time, almost no one questioned this, only feeling impressed by Hee-moon's connections. It wasn't until he was caught and imprisoned for fraud and illegal trading that this story resurfaced online. Chinese authorities were forced to deny the claims, stating that Jiangsu had no such official that Hee-moon had mentioned. Moreover, the Chinese airport photo he posted was simply downloaded from the internet. In short, the entire post was his fabrication. And so, Hee-moon's empire completely collapsed. Unfortunately, the investors he deceived collapsed with him. Thousands of people lost their entire investments, and many were left with enormous debts. Some victims, unable to cope, tragically ended their lives in despair. One could imagine that if Hee-moon hadn't been imprisoned, he might have been killed by his victims. Therefore, it wasn't surprising that some people, unable to take revenge on him directly, might turn their anger towards his parents. However, if this was truly the case, solving the crime would be extremely difficult, because Hee-moon had deceived so many people. Just as the police were struggling with this dilemma, the officer who had earlier discovered the contradiction proposed an idea. The reporter, Hee-jin, had been concealing his brother's identity to hide their past and hadn't told the police about his brother. Now that this veil had been lifted, there was no need for secrecy anymore. Perhaps now he would share more useful information for solving the case. This officer's intuition proved correct. When investigators frankly confronted the truth, Hee-jin indeed revealed more information like a dam breaking. He disclosed that after his brother Hee-moon went to prison, although they had returned some illegal funds, the family still retained significant cash and assets. This was why they had to live discreetly, avoiding attention from curious eyes. Moreover, since his brother had been in prison for some time, he initially didn't think his parents' deaths were related to this matter. In short, he was just trying to justify why he hadn't previously disclosed everything. After these meaningless explanations, Hee-jin mentioned something strange that made people think. On February 25th, the night of the murders, he had received a message from his mother on a messaging app. His mother said she had just met a successful Harvard graduate businessman named Kim Jung-ho and wanted Hee-jin to arrange time to meet him to discuss potential business cooperation. So, Hee-jin had added Jung-ho as a contact and planned to chat online first, with the intention of meeting in person if there was potential for cooperation. Unexpectedly, during their conversation, Hee-jin accidentally clicked the video call button and the other party connected. At that moment, Hee-jin caught a glimpse of Jung-ho's round, full face. Initially, this seemed like a perfectly normal occurrence. But the strange thing was, hadn't forensics determined that both victims were murdered on the evening of February 25th? How could Soon-ja have sent messages to Hee-jin? At this point, there were only two possibilities. Either forensics had incorrectly determined the time of death, or the person messaging Hee-jin was the killer. If it was the latter, this self-proclaimed Kim Jung-ho could very well be the murderer. The attempt to meet Hee-jin might have been intended to kill him too, with revenge against the family as the motive. Therefore, police immediately created a sketch based on Hee-jin's description and showed it to the villagers who had seen the suspect. Everyone agreed that the person in the sketch looked quite similar to the mysterious man who had burned the bag near the warehouse on the night of the murders. With the suspect's appearance and build now identified, police used this information to check surveillance cameras around the crime scene. They quickly spotted the suspect in street camera footage. When analyzing the surveillance video carefully, investigators discovered a crucial detail. The suspect didn't act alone but had 3 accomplices. However, due to poor image quality, police could only identify and arrest the mastermind, Kim Dae-yoon, the person who had impersonated Kim Jung-ho to approach the victim's family through the messaging app. Contrary to investigators' expectations of a hardened criminal, Dae-yeon proved quite forthcoming. Immediately after his arrest, he admitted to all his crimes and willingly revealed his motives. But the story he told was even more shocking than his crimes. As police had suspected, Dae-yoon was one of Hee-moon's countless victims. However, unlike most of those who were deceived, he wasn't an ordinary victim. Dae-yeon came from a privileged background, having completed both his bachelor's and master's degrees in the United States. Afterward, he successfully established a yacht rental company there and thrived for many years. Until August 2017, when tragedy struck, his business failed, his marriage fell apart, forcing him to return to South Korea. After returning home, Dae-yeon planned to use his remaining assets to rebuild his career, continuing the yacht rental business in the Gyeonggi area. Unexpectedly, he happened to meet Hee-moon. Since Dae-yeon was looking for investors at the time, Hee-moon, with his wealth and influence, became someone he wanted to impress. As a result, he not only participated in Hee-moon's financial projects, but even gave Hee-moon's father 20 million won, about $16,000, as spending money. Finally, with Hee-moon's collapse, Dae-yeon, who had returned from America hoping to rebuild his life, was also scammed into complete bankruptcy. But since Hee-moon was already sentenced to prison, Dae-yeon couldn't take revenge on him directly and decided to target his family instead. However, due to Dae-yeon's poor physical condition, to ensure safety, he claimed to have hired 3 young Korean Chinese men online. Dae-yeon stated that these 3 men were the ones who actually killed the elderly Lee couple, while he only handled planning and crime scene cleanup. Immediately after the murders, the 3 accomplices allegedly flew back to Jilin Province, China. Although this temporarily prevented South Korean police from arresting all suspects, it didn't affect their determination of Dae-yeon as the primary perpetrator. Therefore, logically, the next step would be the standard trial process. But what investigators didn't expect was that when detailed information about the murders of the elderly Lee couple was reported by the media, it sparked major controversy. Instead of condemning Dae-yeon's brutal actions, the South Korean public unanimously voiced support and called for the court to reduce his punishment. This strange reaction led many to question. No matter how despicable Hee-moon was, his parents were innocent, so how could the Korean public be so blind? But the truth behind this reaction was even more shocking. Hee-moon's financial empire was actually a family business, where each member played a role in the fraud scheme. His parents weren't merely innocent bystanders, but actively participated in management. Particularly, Soon-ja, the supposedly innocent mother, regularly appeared on her son's paid channel, using her image as a respectable mother to persuade and lure people into investing in the stocks their family promoted. After the scheme was exposed, Soon-ja was also convicted, but only received a suspended sentence and a fine of 50 million won, about $40,000. Simply put, the elderly couple were accomplices to their son's crimes. However, When faced with public criticism online, the couple not only didn't apologize but coldly declared that no one in all of South Korea studies stocks as seriously as our son, implying that convicting Hee-moon of fraud was unjust. Now you understand why public opinion sided with Dae-eun, don't you? Just when the case seemed to be reaching its conclusion, an unexpected twist emerged. The three Korean-Chinese accomplices, after returning to China, suddenly posted shocking accusations about Dae-eun. If Hee-moon was a financial fraudster, Dae-eun was even more vicious. He deceived people to take lives. Dae-eun's previous statements about being only the mastermind, while the other three were the direct perpetrators, suddenly collapsed. These three individuals revealed the frightening truth behind the murders. Everything began about a month before the tragedy, when Dae-eun posted a job listing for security guards online. The three young men were attracted by promises of an easy job with attractive pay, applied, and were quickly hired. But when they completed all procedures and made the long journey to South Korea, Dae-eun's first request wasn't normal security work. It was the horrifying task of transporting two elderly corpses to a remote warehouse in the countryside. Fortunately, these three young men weren't foolish. When they discovered they were transporting corpses, they immediately refused Dae-eun's request and fled back to their country. In other words, the three supposed accomplices were actually laborers whom Dae-eun had lured from China to South Korea, and they were completely innocent in the massacre. All crimes were committed by him alone. However, South Korean police couldn't hastily believe these accusations. While requesting China's cooperation in extraditing the three men, they thoroughly investigated the group's movements during their time in South Korea. What they discovered supported the three men's testimonies. None of them had received any money from Dae-eun. In fact, one of them had to borrow 200,000 won, about $160, from local friends just to buy a plane ticket home. This detail completely contradicted Dae-eun's claim about hiring them to commit murder. But this discovery led to a bigger question. If Kim Dae-eun had lied about these three men's roles, was his entire previous confession reliable? Were there other secrets behind the case waiting to be revealed? Following this line of investigation, sure enough, even the revenge-killing story was a lie. Dae-eun had committed this crime for different reasons. For over a year prior, he had posed as a private detective to approach victims of Hee-moon's fraud, particularly those who had gone to his house to demand compensation, and indirectly gathered information about the current personnel structure and financial situation of Hee-moon's family. He even stalked the parents, installing tracking devices and wiretaps in their car. Moreover, as mentioned earlier, on the morning of the murders, Hee-jin had given his parents 500 million won from selling the car, and this money eventually disappeared. Some might think that taking the money while seeking revenge was convenient. Why waste it? The issue was the timing was too precise. Could this really be coincidental? Later, police discovered a crucial detail. Hee-jin's Bugatti Veyron had actually sold for 1.5 billion won, about $1.2 million. He had given his parents 500 million won, keeping 1 billion won, about $800,000, for himself. His parents knew about this. If his parents knew, then Dae-eun could have known through his wiretapping devices. That's why after the murders, he immediately tried to meet Hee-jin. The purpose was likely to steal the remaining 1 billion won. While coordinating to meet Hee-jin in person, Dae-eun was also in contact with a broker to prepare for an escape to the Philippines at any moment. Putting everything together, police concluded that Dae-eun was the sole perpetrator of this crime, and his true motive was robbery. Consequently, the Suwon Supreme Court indicted Kim Dae-eun on multiple charges including robbery, murder, corpse disposal, and illegal trespassing. He was ultimately sentenced to life imprisonment in the first trial. Although he appealed in 2021, the Supreme Court rejected his appeal and upheld the original sentence. Notably, by this time, Hee-moon, who had been convicted of fraud, had been released after serving his prison term. Logically, several years in prison and his parents' horrific deaths should have taught him a lesson and led him to reform his life. Unexpectedly, after laying low for a while, Hee-moon resurfaced and began using Bitcoin to commit fraud. After his crimes were discovered, he was arrested again in September 2023. However, this time, he was quickly released on bail. Perhaps the most bitter aspect of this story is that after his release from prison, Lee Hee-moon seemed unaffected by his dark past and his parents' deaths. Using his remaining wealth, he married a female idol, built a family, and enjoyed a luxurious lifestyle. This case isn't just a tragedy about greed and revenge, but also a warning about how people can lose their humanity for money. Some commit fraud without remorse, others readily kill for robbery, leaving permanent scars on society. And that's today's case.